Hi, everybody. I'm making this video because I don't want to fall further behind and try to make good use of our time reading. So I'm going to do the guided reading and I'm going to be taking and guiding you through notes. So please make sure that you have paper and we are going to label these notes as Act 2. And of course, this is for Hamlet. And if you remember, the way that Act One ended was the ghost um, telling Hamlet everything that actually happened with his murder. And then Hamlet telling his friends, you need to swear not to say anything. And I might be acting a little bit weird later on, but don't blow it. And that was basically how Act One ended. So we're going to read together the first part of Act Two. So, what we need to take note of is that Act Two begins in Polonius's chambers. So, this is scene one. And I'm going to put this down in my notes. Scene one, Polonius's chambers, which just means this is his section of the castle, probably like a very huge room. And you're going to have a new character. And even just looking at this page, we see that we have, oh no, maybe we did meet Rinaldo before. Sorry. Okay, so let's see. So it says, enter old Polonius with his man, Reynaldo. So let's see what happens.
Act 2, Scene 1, Polonius's chambers. Enter old Polonius with his man, Reynaldo.
Give him this money and these notes, Rinaldo.
I will, my lord.
You shall do marvelous wisely, good Rinaldo, before you visit him, to make inquire of his behavior.
My lord, I did intend it.
Very well said, very well said. Look you, sir, inquire me first what Danskers are in Paris, and how and who, what means, and where they keep, what company, at what expense, and finding by this encompassment and drift of question that they do know my son, come you more near than your particular demands will touch it. Take you, as 'twere some distant knowledge of him, as thus, I know his father and his friends, and in part him. Do you mark this, Rinaldo?
Aye, very well, my lord.
And in part him, but, you may say, not well. But if it be he I mean, he's very wild, addicted so-and-so. And there put on him what forgeries you please. Marry, none so rank as may dishonour him, take heed of that. But, sir, such wanton, wild, and usual slips as our companions noted, and most known to youth and liberty.
As gaming, my lord.
Aye, or drinking, fencing, swearing, quarrelling, drabbing, you may go so far.
My lord, that would dishonour him.
Faith, no, as you may season it in the charge. You must not put another scandal on him that he is open to incontinency. That's not my meaning. But breathe his faults so quaintly that they may seem the taints of liberty, the flash and outbreak of a fiery mind, a savageness in unreclaimed blood, of general assault.
All right, so this part sometimes can be kind of difficult, but we should kind of get an idea of what Polonius is up to. So let's go back and look at some of this. So we have Polonius, and he says, give him this money and these notes, Reynaldo. And so we definitely should be asking the question, who is Polonius giving money to and which notes? And Reynaldo says, I will, my lord. And he says, you will do marvelous wisely, good Reynaldo, before you visit him to make inquire of his behavior. And he says, my lord, I did intend it. I was going to do that. Mary, well said, very well said. Look you, sir, inquire me first what Dankskers are in Paris, and how and who, what means, where they keep, what company, at what expense, and finding by this encompassment and drift of question that they do know my son. So we know that Polonius is trying to get information about his son Laertes. We know that Laertes went to France, and so he has some directions for Reynaldo, and he wants him to find some things out. Before you visit him, inquire of his behavior. So he wants to know, how is Laertes behaving in France? Let's look at our note here. Polonius tells him to start by asking general questions because he will find out more through this roundabout approach than by asking specific questions about Laertes. So there's this whole plan. He says, don't ask specifically. First, ask some general questions about him. And then he says, by doing that, you're going to get more near than your particular demands will touch it. And he says, take as it you were some distant knowledge of him, like act like you knew him at some point, and say something like, I know his father and his friends, and basically I know him. And so you're going to notice that Polonius, we have these quotes, and he's telling Reynaldo, you need to say this, and you need to say this. See, you have more quotes here. And impart him, you may say not well, like say you know him, but that you don't know him really, really well. And then he says, you may say not well, but if it be he, I mean, he's, and then say things like, oh, he's very wild. And there put on him what forgeries you please. And he's like, say what you want about him. And there's a reason for this, because he says, if you say these things, then somebody is likely to say, oh, yeah, Laertes does this. If you say, oh, yeah, Laertes drinks a lot, then the person you're talking to will find it easier to agree with you. And that's a way to get more information. So we're going to take a note here. So we're going to put something like Polonius. And basically, Polonius is hiring Reynaldo. So we can put that, or even pays him. Polonius employs Reynaldo to go spy on his son Laertes in France. And, he tells him exactly how to do it, but I'm going to just put this. Polonius employs Reynaldo to go spy on his son Laertes in France. And I'm going to put this whole page because a lot of it is this whole thing. So this is page 263. Let's continue.
But, my good lord,
Wherefore should you do this?
I, my lord, I would know that.
Marry, sir, here's my drift, and I believe it is a fetch of wit. You, laying these slight sullies on my son, as 'twere a thing a little soiled in the working, mark you, your party in converse, him you would sound, having ever seen in the predominant crimes the youth you breathe of guilty, be assured he closes with you in this consequence. Good sir, or so, or friend, or gentleman, according to the phrase or the addition of man and country.
Very good, my lord.
And then, sir, does he this, he does... What was I about to say? By the mass, I was about to say something. Where did I leave?
At closes in the consequence. At friend or so and gentleman.
At closes in the consequence. Aye, marry. He closes thus. I know the gentleman. I saw him yesterday, or the other day, or then, with such or such. And as you say, there was he gaming, there or took in his rouse, there falling out at tennis, or perchance, I saw him enter such a house of sale, videlicet a brothel, or so forth. See you now, your bait of falsehood take this carp of truth, and thus do we of wisdom and of reach, with windlasses and with assays of bias, by indirections find directions out. So, by my former lecture and advice, shall you, my son. You have me, have you not?
My lord, I have.
God be with you. Fare you well.
Good, my lord.
Observe his inclination in yourself.
All right. So, and as he had said before, he's like, you can say certain things about him so that you can get information. Let's look at this note right here. Polonius wants Reynaldo to put these small stains, sullies, on his son's reputation, similar to the way in which cloth might be dirtied when it is handled, and then asks the person whether he has seen Laertes engaged in the offenses Reynaldo has mentioned. So just as I had said before, Polonius gives permission for him to say bad things about Laertes to see if that will get more information. So we can write this down in our notes. So we're going to put Polonius. I don't know if I should put allows or encourages. I'm going to put encourages. Encourages Reynaldo to lie about his son's reputation to get more information. Because when he puts this on Laertes, then those people he's talking to, as I said before, will be more likely to divulge information about Laertes. So I'll repeat the note again. Polonius encourages Reynaldo to lie about his son's reputation to get more information. The other thing let's do the citation. I'm so sorry. And we'll actually do this one because it's very specific. So we're going to put Act 2, Scene 1, lines 41 to 46. Okay. The other thing I want you to notice about Polonius is, let's see, where is it? Where is it? Oh, I'm so sorry. Right here at line 50. And he says, what was I about to say? My goodness, what was I about to say? I was saying something. Where did I leave off? Notice that Polonius at line 50 is very forgetful. So Polonius is forgetful. Act 1, Scene 1, line 50 to 52. 51, 52. So you're getting some characterization of Polonius in all of this. You notice that he's hiring somebody to go and spy on his son. And here you're noticing he is very forgetful. Let's continue.
I shall, my lord.
And let him ply his music.
Well, my lord.
Very well. How now, Ophelia, what's the matter?
Oh, my lord, I have been so affrighted.
With what in the name of God?
My lord, as I was sewing in my closet, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all embraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and downjived to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors, he comes before me.
Mad for thy love?
My lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it.
What said he?
He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand, thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. Long stayed he so. At last, a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound as it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulder turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last bended their light on me.
Come, go with me. I will go seek the king. This is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property fordoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings as oft as any passions under heaven that does afflict our natures. I am sorry. What, have you given him any hard words of late?
All right, so after Reynaldo leaves, Ophelia comes in, and something really weird has happened. And, Polonius even says, oh my gosh, Ophelia, what's the matter? And she's like, something so scary has just happened to me. And Polonius says, well, what was it? And then she recounts an incident that just happened with Hamlet. And she says, "My lord, as I was sewing in my closet, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down jived to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking together, and with a look so piteous in purport, as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors, he comes before me." So she says she had been sewing in her closet, and then Hamlet came in. Let me see if they give us any notes. And she describes how Hamlet looked. First, she says that his jacket was completely undone, like his shirt is all unbuttoned, and he doesn't have a hat, which, because she says this must have been unusual at that time. His stockings, which are kind of like his socks or the tights that they used to wear, were had fallen around his ankles and they looked all dirty and messy. And she mentions he was as pale as his shirt, so he doesn't have good color in his skin, and his knees are knocking together. So we have to think, how is it that Hamlet is looking right now? And she says it's almost as if he had been released out of, he looks like he had escaped or been released out of hell. And so the way he looks really scares her. So we're going to take note of this. Hamlet went to Ophelia's room. She calls it her closet. Her closet's probably huge. Hamlet went to Ophelia's closet looking, he looks very messy. You can put very messy. I'm going to put disheveled. Disheveled means when your clothes are all messed up, you look like probably you've been in a fight or something. So I'm going to use the word disheveled. You can use that word, or you can put messy. And Polonius is like, well, he's probably mad for your love. And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm worried that it might be. And he's like, what did he say to you? And then she explains what Hamlet did. And she says, he took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of his arm. So he grabs her by the wrist and then he extends his arm until, they're kind of far apart. And with his other hand over his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. So now she says he's looking at her face, like studying it, almost as if he was going to draw it, looking at all the details. And she says, long stayed he so. So he kept staring at her face for a very long time. And then she says, at last, or finally, a little shaking of my arm, and then thrice, his head thus waving up and down. So he shakes her arm, he looks her up and down like 3 times. He raised a sigh so profound that it seemed to shatter all of his being. And then she says, that done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulders, he seemed to find his way out without his eyes. For out of doors he went, without their helps. So he does, he grabs her arm, looks and stares at her face for a long time, then sighs very profoundly, and then he walks out without even looking towards the door. He's looking at her as he's leaving, and this freaks her out. So we need to take note of this. So we know Hamlet went to Ophelia's closet looking disheveled. He grabs her arm. So I'm going to write, he grabs her arm and strangely stares at her, leaves without saying a word. All right, so I have this note from the other part, and I put, Hamlet went to Ophelia's closet looking disheveled. He grabs her arm and strangely stares at her, leaves without saying a word. This is weird. This freaked her out. And Polonius says, we need to go find the king. This is the very ecstasy of love. He's like, he's totally in love with you. This is what's going on. Let's continue.
No, my good lord, but as you did command, I did repel his letters and denied his access to me.
That hath made him mad. I am sorry that with better heed and judgment I had not quoted him. I feared he did but trifle and meant to rack thee. But beshrew my jealousy. By heaven, it is as proper to our age to cast beyond ourselves and our opinions as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. Come, go we to the king. This must be known, which, being kept close, might move more grief to hide than hate to utter love. Come.
Scene 2.
All right, so I forgot to mention on the page before, Polonius had said, he's like, did you talk to him? Did you give him any hard words of late? So he kind of accuses Ophelia. He's like, what did you do to like instigate this? And she tells him, no, my good lord, but as you did command, I did repel his letters and denied his access to me. So, according to her, she says, I listened to you. I haven't said anything to him. Because at first he's kind of accusing. And he finally says, we need to go talk to the king. So, let me see, what should we put? So, we'll end this note with Polonius questions Ophelia talking to Hamlet. Polonius questions Ophelia talking to Hamlet. She says she has rejected, she uses the word repel, but I'm going to put rejected, has rejected his letters. And that will be my last note for this scene. I hope you were able to get good notes, and hopefully we can read together next time. Thank you guys. See you next time.